In the 9th century, a vast empire emerged in Eastern Europe, stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. This was not the Russian Empire we know from modern history, but its predecessor, Kievan Rus. How did this early medieval state evolve into the Russian Empire that would dominate Eurasia for centuries? Kievan Rus was established in 862, uniting various East Slavic tribes under a single authority. This coming together was the start of a big political group that would have a big impact on the future of Eastern Europe. The creation of the state paved the way for the cultural and political growth of the area, paving the way for later Russian empires to form. In 988, when Prince Vladimir I became a Christian, it was a turning point in the history of Kievan Rus. Byzantine and Slavic traditions came together because of this decision, which had a big impact on how Russians see themselves. Eastern Orthodox Christianity becoming a part of Kievan society would have long-lasting effects on Russian art, culture, and government for hundreds of years. Rise from the ashes, the Grand Duchy of Moscow. The Mongol invasion shattered Kievan Rus, but it also sowed the seeds for a new power. As the dust settled, one principality began a remarkable ascent. What hidden strengths allowed Moscow to rise from obscurity and become the nucleus of a unified Russian state? The devastating Mongol invasions from 1237 to 1240 had a profound impact on Kievan Rus, leading to the disintegration of its political structure. This tumultuous period created a power vacuum in the region, setting the stage for the emergence of new political entities. Among these, the Grand Duchy of Moscow would prove to be the most resilient and ambitious. Initially, Moscow was a small, unremarkable principality. However, its strategic location and the political acumen of its rulers allowed it to capitalize on the decline of Mongol power in the 14th century. The Grand Duchy of Moscow began to assert its dominance over other Russian principalities, culminating in a series of significant victories. The Battle of Kulikovo in 1380 marked a turning point, establishing Moscow's preeminence among the Russian states. The rise of Moscow from a minor outpost to the center of Russian power was largely due to the efforts of its rulers, particularly Ivan III, also known as Ivan the Great. His reign from 1462 to 1505 was transformative for the Grand Duchy. Ivan III played a crucial role in consolidating Russian territories and expelling the Mongols, proclaiming his sovereignty over all Russian princes and nobles. Under Ivan III's leadership, the Grand Duchy of Moscow underwent a remarkable expansion. Through a combination of conquest, political maneuvering, and strategic marriages, the territory under Moscow's control tripled in size. This territorial growth laid the groundwork for the future Russian Empire, establishing Moscow as the heart of a unified Russian state. The period of Mongol influence, despite its destructive impact, inadvertently fostered the development of administrative practices in Muscovy. The Mongols introduced a postal road network and a fiscal system that would become essential for the governance of the expanding Russian state. These administrative innovations proved invaluable as Moscow extended its control over vast territories. Ivan III's reign also marked a decisive shift in Moscow's relationship with the Mongols. He initiated a series of military campaigns against the Golden Horde, leading to the eventual decline of Mongol influence in Russia by the late 15th century. The standoff at the Ugra River in 1480 symbolized the end of Mongol domination, as Ivan III refused to pay tribute and successfully resisted Mongol attempts to reassert control. The Grand Duchy of Moscow's transformation from a small principality to a major power is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of its leaders. They navigated the complex political landscape of post-Mongol Russia with skill, gradually consolidating power and expanding their influence. This period of growth and consolidation set the stage for the emergence of the Russian Empire, which would dominate Eurasia for centuries to come. The birth of an empire, from Tsardom to Russian Empire. Putting more power in the hands of Moscow's princes was just the start. Russia would reach from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean in just 200 years. What caused this fast growth? And how did it change the balance of power in Asia and Europe in a fundamental way? In 1547, something very important happened that changed Russia from a small regional power to a huge empire that stretched across 2 continents. The Tsardom of Russia was officially set up when Ivan IV, who became known as Ivan the Terrible, was named the first Tsar of Russia. This name, which comes from the Latin word for Caesar, showed that Ivan claimed to be the next Roman emperor and raised Moscow's status on the world stage. Heavily expanding his territory, especially into Siberia, was a hallmark of Ivan IV's rule. When Russia took over the Khanates of Kazan in 1552 and Astrakhan in 1556, it made it possible for them to explore and settle large areas in the east. By the end of the 1600s, Russia had finished exploring and taking over Siberia, making it reach all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Russian history went through a rough patch called the Time of Troubles, after Ivan IV's son, Fyodor I, died without an heir in 1598. The Romanov dynasty took over Russia in 1613, ending this troubled time. They would rule for the next 300 years. The Romanovs were very important in Russia's growth and modernization, which made it possible for it to become a major power in Europe. Russia's history changed a lot during the rule of Peter the Great from 1682 to 1725. Peter started a big plan to modernize Russia in the style of Western Europe through a series of reforms. He made changes to the Russian military and government, made St. Petersburg the new capital, and tried to make Russia more like the West. Getting access to the Baltic Sea by beating Sweden in the Great Northern War was Peter's most important military accomplishment. Following this victory in 1721, Peter took the title of Emperor, making Russia an official empire. Catherine the Great, 1762 to 1796, carried on Peter's efforts to make Russia more like the West and grew the Russian Empire even more. Her rule is linked to the Russian Enlightenment because she supported education and the arts, while also being aggressive in foreign affairs. Through both military victories and diplomatic maneuvers, Catherine added a lot of new land to the empire. Crimea and parts of Poland are examples of this. As the Russian Empire grew quickly, it faced a lot of problems. When different groups of people and territories joined, it required new ways of running the government and running things. During the reign of Alexis I, the empire was hit by many revolts, such as the Salt Riot and the Copper Riot. These events showed the problems that come with ruling such a large and varied area. One of the biggest problems that the Russian Empire had to deal with was the way serfdom had become deeply ingrained in Russian society. In 1861, Tsar Alexander II ended serfdom, which was a huge change that was meant to calm down society and bring the Russian economy up to date. This freed millions of serfs and changed Russian society and the economy in big ways. The Russian Empire grew to be the third biggest empire in history by the end of the 1800s. It covered about 22.8 million square kilometers. It covered a huge area, from Poland in the west to Alaska in the east, and had a lot of different cultures, religions, and languages. Russia has become a major player on the world stage thanks to its empire's growth, which changed the balance of power in both Europe and Asia. The legacy of empires, from the Soviet Union to modern Russia. Even though it was very big and strong, the Russian Empire was about to go through a big and important change. How did the fall of the Tsars make way for a new superpower? In what ways does Russia's desire to rule the world still affect it today? History changed a lot because of the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Russian Empire had been around for hundreds of years. This ended it and began a new era of communist rule. People were unhappy with the monarchy, which was made worse by bad economic management and military failures in World War I. This led to the revolution. It turned into the Soviet Union, which was the world's most important government for most of the 20th century. Since it began in 1922, the Soviet Union was very different from the old imperial system. The Ukrainian SSR, the Belarusian SSR, and the Transcaucasian SFSR all signed the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR. The four republics were now one state. The new union's goal was to create a socialist society based on the ideas of Marx and Lenin. This would change the social and economic structure of the old Russian Empire in a big way. The Soviet Union was one of the world's strongest countries after the war. The Allies won because of its important military contributions. It also helped set up a network of satellite states in Eastern Europe, which increased its power and influence. The US and the USSR were at odds with each other politically during the Cold War. This battle changed the way countries interact with each other for decades. But in the end, it was clear that the Soviet system did not work. There was a time when Mikhail Gorbachev was in charge of the Soviet Union. He tried to change things by putting in place the policies of glasnost, also known as openness, and perestroika, also known as restructuring. Now, even though these policies were meant to save the Soviet Union, they made it fall faster by exposing problems in the economy and society that had been there for a long time. The breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991 was another big event in Russian history. So, the Russian Federation was the main state that took over after the breakup. It kept the nuclear weapons that the Soviet Union had, but it was no longer a superpower. It was a very rough time for business and politics in Russia because the country was trying to move its economy from being run by the government to being based on the market. The 1990s were a very important time for Russia's economy. Boris Yeltsin led the way. The name for these changes is shock therapy. For many Russians, these changes were very bad for their money, even though the goal was to quickly move Russia to a market economy. During this time, a lot of people were dishonest, and the number of oligarchs grew. The standard of living for most people also went down. When Vladimir Putin took office in the early 2000s, the government became more centralized and authoritarian. In Putin's time in office, the main goal was to restore Russia's global influence and make its power known in world affairs. Many people see these efforts as Russia's attempt to regain the power it once had, just like empires did in the past. People think that Russia wants to take over the world because of what it has done recently in world politics. People talked about Russia's choice to take back control of former Soviet territories again when it annexed Crimea in 2014 after a controversial vote. The United States and the European Union punished Russia economically by putting in place strict rules. This made it harder for Russia to get along with Western countries. And then there's still the conflict in Ukraine that got worse when Russia invaded in 2022. Many people still see this as a reminder of Russia's past attempts to become an empire. This war has changed more than just Eastern Europe's politics. It has also changed the way the world's security is set up and how countries interact with each other. So, what are your thoughts on this? Please do let me know in the comments down below. Also, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to stay tuned for more interesting videos.